Merry Christmas, World Series champions. We're going to talk about the Dodgers 2024 season, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is the daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening or watching every day, and you can subscribe by getting notified, or you can subscribe to get notified when episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube. If this is your first time listening or watching, welcome. I'm Samperio. That's Jeff Snider, and we have been doing Locked On Dodgers for 6 years now, going into year 7. And we've been covering the Dodgers for a little bit longer than that, and we've been Dodger fans our whole life. So you can pretty much say, we've seen and talked and heard a lot about the Dodgers, and we're here to do that once again. As we are recording right now, it is Christmas Eve, but as you will be listening, it is Christmas if you celebrate. So Merry Christmas to all of you.
And it's also a rare occurrence. The first night of Hanukkah is on December 25th this year, and so the Christian world and the Jewish world coming together on December 25th to celebrate something. So that locks down a lot of our audience anyway. And if you're not celebrating anything other than the Dodgers being World Series champions, we welcome you to World Champs.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody listening. And we wanted to talk about the 2024 season. Obviously, we talked about it as it went on. Obviously, we've talked about different, Shohei Ohtani moments and things of that nature, Walker Buehler moments, yesterday's episode. But the 2024 season, brought us some, not so much heartbreak, probably more some annoying times, a couple low points maybe, but definitely a lot of high points. And then definitely the highest point there in October. So while it's easy to say, yes, the highest point was the Dodgers winning the World Series, and that might be your answer, Jeff, we're going to start with the highest point of the season for the Dodgers, or regular season. So I guess this is about the regular season, so we won't be talking about the Dodgers being champions. So you will maybe have a different answer than I thought.
Yeah. Tomorrow's episode we'll talk about the postseason, but today we're talking regular season. And for me, there were so many high points of the season. It was a great season, a lot of fun. But I think the high point for me was Ohtani's game in Miami, because what it was for him, getting the 50-50, one of the best games in baseball history, but also it put the Dodgers up by 4 games with less than 10 games to play. It didn't clinch anything. They didn't clinch until a few days later against the Padres. But that one, it kind of, after the Dodgers had lost that first game of that Miami series and then winning the second game and then dominating that third game, it kind of, I don't know, to me it felt like that was when I never had many doubts that the Dodgers were going to win the division, but that game I think was when I felt like, okay, Dodgers just locked this up, and to have it be such a big game for Ohtani and everything, it was just so much fun to watch. That I think that was the high point of the season for me.
Yeah, no, that was, it's hard to not go with an answer like that when, Ohtani did everything you could possibly do. The Dodgers won, and it was overall, generally a fun time. And it's hard not to go to like the end of the season for a high point because that's when the Dodgers, peaked a little bit and when they, clinched the division and everything else. And while clinching the division against the Padres was fun, I do think a few days before that, when they beat the Rockies, they came back and then they ended up walking off the Rockies in the bottom of the 9th. And it was the the Dodgers were still fighting for the division a little bit. You have Shohei Ohtani, you have Mookie Betts. They're due up, and you're like, okay, let's just get one run. But I don't think anyone expects them to go back to back to walk off the game, and that's exactly what they did. And that's when it was like, okay, cool. Like the Dodgers are probably going to win the division now, and this was really fun, especially with Ohtani pursuing and getting to 50-50 and seeing, does he have a chance at 60-60 type deal? And then with Mookie, having kind of the weird season where it was a little bit down defensively because he was still figuring out shortstop. Then he got hurt, but he was really good offensively the whole time. But yeah, that game was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a good one too. And there was a lot of high points. Ohtani's 40-40 walk-off was pretty cool too. We're limiting ourselves to one high point, but I suspect we could have done a series of episodes and do a high point of each month and had just as many awesome things to talk about.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the clinching the division at home against the Padres. They hadn't done it at home in a while against a team that was chasing you, and losing that first game the way they did in that series to let the Padres clinch the playoff spot, with the triple play ending that game, and then for the Dodgers come back, win the next two, clinch the division, solidify everything, not have to worry about winning games in Colorado that final weekend of the season. That's probably technically the highest point of the season, but we didn't want to just jump onto that. So
yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of different things throughout the season. I guess from the high points, how many games did you go to this year?
I only got to, I think, 4 games this year.
Okay, so
maybe 5.
I was going to say high point of game that you went to, but I'm sure you saw a win in those 5, so that probably worked out.
I did. I was there at the home opener. The Dodgers won that game. Ohtani ripping a double in his very first home at bat with the Dodgers and then getting thrown out trying to stretch it to a triple because he didn't realize that Mookie had stopped. That was exciting. All in all, I can't remember a lot of specifics about games I was at this year. There's just all I can see in my head is Freddie Freeman's grand slam over and over because that's kind of replaced all my other memories. So,
yeah, it's hard to look back at the regular season knowing what happened in the post, because the postseason felt super long, even though the Dodgers only at one point where they really threatened to lose a series or face elimination. That last month just felt really, really long.
It really did, yeah.
Yeah. But we're going to talk more about the Dodgers 2024 regular season, specifically players that surprised us good and bad. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot or that you were paying for twice? Because it definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Rocket Money is definitely clutch when it comes to finding things you didn't even remember you were subscribed to, or that, us millennials don't really like to make phone calls or do things that take more than a few minutes at a time. And Rocket Money takes care of all that. You don't have to worry about it. They fight the battles for you. So make sure to go cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. We sometimes can be your last listen of the day if you listen to us live on YouTube. So we appreciate you for that too. If you listen at any point in your day, you are one of our favorites. You can also go on YouTube and subscribe to Locked On Dodgers, find out when we're going live. And on YouTube, you can also check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles. Those are two 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Jeff. So in the 2024 regular season, obviously the team that started opening day in Korea and even the team that started opening day at Dodger Stadium was a little bit different from the team that ended up making it to the playoffs, winning the World Series, all that type of stuff. But which player to you surprised you the most in a positive way?
There is plenty. I guess I'd have to go with, I don't know. Like, I think I'd go with Gavin Stone, even though I was one of the people on the Gavin Stone bandwagon. I predicted a good season for him in spring training, but it was still a surprise. It's weird to be right once in a while. And Gavin Stone was so good for so much of the season. Had a little bit of a stumble there for a couple starts in the middle of the season, but pitched really, really well. It was really disappointing that he got hurt at the end of the season. But like, for all the guys who did about what you would expect, Ohtani was a little bit better than we could have hoped for. Freddie was a little bit worse. Mookie was about the same as we would have hoped when he was healthy, but was hurt. Gavin Stone was the guy who just came not out of nowhere, but out of a really bad 2023 season and solidified. I mean, he led the Dodgers in innings pitched and starts. Just, he was their most dependable starting pitcher, which I don't think a lot of people would have predicted.
Yeah, it was, sad to see him get hurt there at the end of the year, miss out on, potential postseason starts. But, definitely a guy that last year his stock maybe fell in some Dodger fans' eyes, and we weren't entirely sure what Gavin Stone was going to be. And he came back and, proved that he was really good and he could do, pitch really well. And, especially considering there was kind of the comparison with Ryan Pepio and him getting traded in the Rays trade. And it was like, he had a pretty solid season too, but, Gavin Stone, more control and ultimately works out better. Obviously he got hurt. That doesn't, disparage any of those remarks. It just kind of proves that sometimes you don't know what's going to happen with some of these guys, especially when they get hurt. And the Dodgers did have a lot of young guys get hurt this season. And, and I guess not even young guys, because some of them aren't that young. And when they do make it back, they'll be a little bit older, but the Dodgers still have a lot of talent on this team. So I went back and forth. It's tough because I probably, you think of a guy like Ben Casparius and you're like, did I know his name before the season? I don't even think so. Or, I might have read his name, but definitely didn't know him. I think for me, and this was more kind of like you with Stone. Well, maybe not the same, but, Alex Vesia, he's had success in the big leagues so far, and he's, was really good. And then, struggled a little bit last year. And, you chalk it up to a little bit of the pitch clock and then just general reliever volatility. But, up until maybe even late as August, I wasn't completely sold on Vesia yet. Yeah, he had the numbers and, he was pitching well, but it seemed like it was not someone you could count on to come in and not walk a guy or not at least create a little bit of trouble for himself. And then ultimately he had been getting out of it. And, even it did still trickle a little bit into the postseason, the World Series game when we were counting on him for maybe 5-6 outs, he wasn't able to do that, but you can't deny the work. It wasn't like, Brandon League that one year where his ERA was super low, but it seemed like he just luckily stumbled into a bunch of double plays after putting runners on. Vesia was a little bit more impressive in that, he was good for the majority of the season. And when he did get into trouble, he'd get his way out without the value of double plays a lot of the time. So I think that was one guy that surprised me just for the simple fact that I wasn't quite sold on him. And he just continued to chop away. And at the end of the season, he was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Vesia had the best ERA on the team, 1.76 ERA. His FIP was 3.45. So, he outperformed his FIP a lot. But like you said, a lot of that was, in fact, almost all of that was because his walk rate was not good. He walked basically a batter every 2 innings. And seemed like those came in bunches sometimes. And so he did get himself into trouble sometimes, but he was able to get out of it when you've got the strikeout stuff that he does. He also had the best strikeout rate on the team. among people with a lot of innings pitched. Kasparis was a little higher, but he got himself out of jams. And one thing about Vesia is he wants the ball. Like we talked about Walker Buehler yesterday, like Alex Vesia lives for that pressure, that, adrenaline, everything. He wants the ball in big situations, and he came up big many, many times.
And he's fun to watch when he does get out of those situations because, I think relievers of all players on the Dodgers have been the ones to show the most emotion in the last few years. And obviously, it's more based on the environment of when they pitch and how they come in. But it's been fun to see, guys like Evan Phillips who have like shown emotion throughout the years, the last couple of years. It's kind of fun to see those types. But, Vesia it seems like he shotgun a monster every time before he heads out to the mound, and it's fun to kind of watch when he gets celebrated. So,
did we ever find out if he injured his rib celebrating or pitching in the NLCS?
Yeah, I don't know if we ever found out the exact answer, but it could have went either way. Like I said, it does get aggressive, and
it's a high torque delivery and it's a high torque celebration.
Yeah. All right, flipping it over to the other side. Maybe not the most fun topic, but a player that surprised us the most in a negative way.
Why don't you go first on this one?
Yeah, for this one, there's a lot of different answers you could have here. I think I'll go with James Outman just for the fact of we knew that he struck out a lot, and he still struck out a lot in his rookie year, but he was able to compound that with a really, really good regular season in terms of, he had the really hot start and then got really cold and then was able to recover from that. And, baseball is all about adjustments. It's easy to kind of, not easy, but some guys it's easy for them to come in and, you don't know the pitchers that well and they don't know you that well and you're able to have success. But then once the, once there's film on you and everything else, it's hard to, recover from that if you start slumping, because now do they really have you figured out, or is it just, a slump? And then you have to readjust. And he was able to do that his rookie year. And this year, it didn't really happen. He got enough of a leash, I think, to kind of show. And then the Dodgers were in a bit of a fight the entire year with themselves and in the division, where they didn't necessarily have the ability to give Outman the longer leash, that some of the veteran guys got, or that some of the veteran guys get sometimes with the Dodgers. And, even the couple of times he came up throughout the year, it felt like this was a lost year a little bit for Outman in terms of major league development, because playing down there in OKC, it does more for your confidence rather than anything else. I don't think there's too much you can really work on down in AAA that can get you re-ready for the major leagues. And, yeah, I know we got a little flack when I kind of talked about Outman and Jackson Merrill's rookie seasons. There was a big difference there, but, it wasn't extremely far off to where you could have thought, okay, like this guy can be a major league player for us in center field. And then he wasn't.
Yeah, Outman is definitely, it was a bummer to see him regress so hard. My pick is a similar situation, just on the other side of the ball. Guy who had a really good rookie season in 2023, and then the wheels came off. That's Bobby Miller. Basically, Bobby Miller is the opposite of Gavin Stone. Stone was terrible as a rookie in 2023, and then put it together. Miller looked like he was like on the brink of becoming a really, really good big league pitcher, and then his 2024 was just terrible. He had an 8.52 ERA, which, his FIP was a lot better than that, but it was still 6.97. So, that would be really bad. Walked too many guys, gave up way too many home runs, way too many hits, just couldn't get the outs. His strikeout rate dropped some. Strikeouts per 9 was almost the same, but his actual strikeout percentage went from 23.6 down to 20.2. And as a rookie, even the 23.6, it was like, okay, this guy should be striking out more guys with his stuff. And instead he struck out fewer guys. I remain convinced that it was a physical issue, whether it was lingering effects of the shoulder issue or whatever that just messed up his mechanics or if there was actually a lingering injury. I don't know, but I really do believe that Bobby Miller's struggles in 2024 were physical. And hopefully, I remain optimistic that he will be able to put those physical issues behind him in the offseason and come back and actually show in spring training, oh, this guy is actually still a viable option to be a starting pitcher for the Dodgers. It obviously is going to take a lot of work to get him back in the estimation where a lot of people had him, a year ago at this time. But hopefully it was a physical issue because physical issues can heal.
Yeah, you got to hope that it's physical and mechanical. And, we've talked a lot about Bobby Miller throughout the season. And, ultimately, we both believe that he has at least a future as a reliever if he really wanted to, and they wanted to break it down that way. And he still has, I think, a very good future for being a starter, but I do think that, 5-pitch mix that he has maybe has to come down to three that I can go to in any count. And then the other 2 are just kind of there. And, when I'm battling with the guy or something like that. So,
yeah.
But we'll see, those guys, Miller, I don't know. They're both questionable heading into 2025. Like James Outman, at this point, doesn't seem like he has a role on the major league team unless something happens. Or if he does have a role, it's more of a platoon or bench role. Bobby Miller, again, probably in the same boat. Doesn't necessarily have a role for sure on the 2025 Dodgers. But, the way the Dodgers go through players and injuries and everything else, I'm sure we're going to see them on the field at some point, and hopefully it's positive.
Yep. Speaking of positive, let's get more positive in the next segment, okay?
More positive next segment. That's coming up, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel is there. Their app has a lot of different ways for you to pick up the win. You can bet on things before a game, like someone's going to win, someone's going to score a touchdown, someone like that. But even in game, there's a lot of things that are going on, and they have odds for things to happen in game. Some team gets down by 2 touchdowns, but you think they're going to win this game. Kind of like the Bills last week were down early, 2 touchdowns to the Patriots, and if you thought, oh man, I think the Bills are going to come back and win this, you could have put money down in the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and boom, you would have won because the Bills came back and won. So there's different ways to do it. It's all right there on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. And right now, if you bet $5 and win that bet, you get $250 in bonus bets. There's a bunch of NBA games. There's a bunch of 2 NFL games on this Christmas. So make sure to go to FanDuel.com to check out the odds and place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your choice at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We appreciate you if you're an everydayer. An everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. We know that's a lot of commitment, and we appreciate that commitment. If it's too much commitment for you, but you do listen at least once or twice a week, we would like you to up that by 1. And if you up that by 1, maybe you find liking that commitment and upping yourself to 4 episodes, maybe 5 episodes a week. So we appreciate you. Shout out to the FedEx driver that dropped off a package at my house like 2 days ago. He's like, do you have a podcast? And I said, yeah, on the Dodgers. And then he's like, oh yeah, I watch it sometimes. He's like, I knew the name seemed familiar. So we appreciate FedEx drivers and anybody else out there working the lines. You can listen to us while you're driving around delivering packages. So.
To be clear, we also love UPS drivers and U.S. Postal Service drivers and Amazon drivers, all our delivery drivers. We love all of you. And those of you who have other jobs too. I think there are other jobs too. We love you all.
Yeah, all of you guys. And if you want to go beyond the podcast, come Locked On Dodgers Insider. All you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers, and we'll text you and keep you up to date with any Dodger news and updates. All right, Jeff, let's end with all positivity on this last one. Some favorite moments from the regular season. We'll start with favorite pitching performance.
For me, favorite pitching performance, I think there were so many good ones. And I have a hard time because two of my favorites may have led to injuries or at least struggles because Gavin Stone and Yoshinobu Yamamoto both had really big games, both against the Yankees, right? And both in that series. And then Stone followed up with struggles and Yamamoto followed up with an injury. But I think Yamamoto's game against the Yankees was probably my favorite just because – it's the big stage, and Yamamoto at that point, when you sign a guy for $325 million or whatever it was, you kind of, there's a little bit of unknown about, okay, how is he going to transition from, we know he had pitched in big games in Japan, pitched in the World Baseball Classic. So it's not like he was an unknown quantity when it came to big games, but that was our first time getting to see him in a huge atmosphere in the big leagues against a team that, at the time we thought this could be a World Series matchup. Turns out it was, and it kind of set the stage for that. And for him to come through the way he did was huge. It was a really, really fun game to watch that was only a little bit dampened by him going on the injured list shortly after, and us thinking, oh, maybe the fact that his velocity was up 2 miles an hour against the Yankees wasn't such a good thing. But in the moment, it was awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of funny looking back on that series, and it felt like even though you play every team every season now, for whatever reason, that anytime you play the Yankees, it feels a little heightened. And then definitely this year when like the Yankees and Dodgers were both good and, expected to be really good, that series just felt so much bigger. And probably because, maybe a lot of people have Yankee fan friends, or there's a lot of Yankee fans in LA, or whatever the case is. And then Yamamoto goes out and dominates, and you're like, oh man, this is great. And then ultimately it ended up being great again because Yamamoto came back and had another good outing against the Yankees in the World Series this time. So, shout out to Yamamoto for that. For me, it was tough. Like, I love Tyler Glasnow. He had a couple great starts. He had the 14 strikeouts against the Twins, I believe, when he went 7 shutout. But I think for me, it comes to somebody that was on our surprising in a bad way. And it was Bobby Miller's first start of the season when he went 6 shutout innings against the Cardinals and struck out 11. And it was such a high of, oh, Bobby Miller's becoming who we thought. Like, Bobby Miller is going to be that guy this year. He had, a really good rookie year, kind of wasn't ended a little bit in a bad way with the way the postseason game went. And then he comes out and he does that 6, shutout against the Cardinals. So at that point, we're still, maybe some people thought they might be a good team. They have Goldschmidt, they have Arenado, like they, that might have been a good team. And 11 strikeouts, and you're like, yeah, okay, Bobby Miller's here. And it just felt so good because it was so early in the season. And, everything that happened after that is different. But I do think that was still the one that stands out in my mind of, like, which performance was the best from the Dodgers. And that was the first one that came to mind.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Walker Buehler had one really good start shortly after he came back, too. And it was kind of the same thing, like, sweet, Walker Buehler is back. And, he wasn't quite back yet.
Yeah, the Cardinals were generous a couple times. I think the best Kershaw start of the year was also against the Cardinals. He went 6 shutouts. So
turns out maybe the Cardinals just weren't very good in 2024.
Yeah. So, all right. Moving on from the pitching side to the offensive side. There's so many different choices here, but for regular season, the favorite home run of the year.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Obviously, it's hard to not pick one of Ohtani's 50-something home runs. But I think my favorite one is always in those games that are just fun to watch or end up being fun to watch. So for me, it's Teoscar's homer in Colorado. It's if I can remember where I was at and I wasn't at Dodger Stadium for a home run, I think that's a kind of a big thing. And this one I remember specifically because I was at the airport in between flights and I had time. And so I threw the game on my laptop and I was watching it. And, it's one of those where and I don't remember what airport I was in, but definitely not a lot of Dodger fans. So, a random celebration from some guy watching his laptop. You're like, what's going on? But yeah, that one was fun, especially coming off the controversial call on the check swing. And then, the next pitch, or I don't remember if it was the next pitch or not, but he ends up hitting the homer. the Rockies outfielder starting to berate the umpire, and it was just kind of like we talked about at the time, like kind of like similar to Andrew Tolle's grand slam a few years ago in Colorado, where it was one of those improbable things that the Dodgers ended up winning when they probably shouldn't have won. But Coors Field, shout out. Sometimes it is beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very fun one. It definitely made my list. Another Teoscar one that was one of my honorable mentions was his home run in that, the 2 homers he hit in that second game against the Yankees after he had gotten the 2-run double to win the first game against the Yankees. And he hits 2 homers, one off of Dodgers postseason legend Nestor Cortez, another one off of Dodgers postseason legend Tommy Kahnle. Those 2 guys have both done a lot for the Dodgers postseason chances over the last couple of years. But for me, it was hard to not go with the Ohtani home run, and even then, it was hard to narrow it down. The 476-foot home run that almost went out of Dodger Stadium on a Sunday afternoon game, that one was fun. His first home run of the 3-homer game in Miami was one of my favorites that he hit. Just the upper deck shot in right field, very similar to his 3rd homer in that game, but the first one came off an actual pitcher, so that was a little better. But for me, my favorite home run of the season was Ohtani's 40th home run, the walk-off grand slam. It was not quite as dramatic as Freddie Freeman's walk-off grand slam in the World Series because it wasn't in the World Series. It was already a tie game, so it wasn't like a do-or-die thing, but still, 2 outs, bases loaded, walk-off grand slam to get to 40-40. That one, I think, is my second most watched moment, replaying it after Freddie Freeman's grand slam of the 2024 season.
Yeah, shout out walk-off grand slams. They played a big part in the 2024 Dodgers. And, so, I mean, like I said, you could pick almost any Ohtani home run, and it's like a marvel to see, but definitely one that, made history and won the game for the Dodgers. Pretty great. One last one I have before we get out of here. We used to have on our old podcast, we used to have obscure former Dodger of the Day segment. When you think about the 2024 Dodgers, currently as it stands, who's the most obscure random player you can remember that participated in a game for the Dodgers this year?
Probably Eduardo Salazar. He pitched, I think, just the one game. 1 game, 2 innings. And then I just looked at this list, and Connor Brogdon's there too. But Connor Brogdon is he still in the organization, or did they?
He was until the end of the year.
Oh no, that's right. They dumped him, I think. There's some obscure dudes, but Eduardo Salazar is a guy who I had never heard of before this season, and then suddenly he's on the team. I think he had even a couple stints with the Dodgers, but only got in 1 game, and then he was gone. And I will never think about him again until we do our next obscure Dodgers segment.
Yeah, and it's one of those where when you're still kind of close to it, like there's going to be an episode, if we're still doing this down the line in like 5 years, or like, oh yeah, Kevin Biggio was a Dodger, or Nick Ahmed was a Dodger, or someone like that. But I think for me, like the most random, and they ultimately both had a couple like actual moments with the Dodgers. So I'll do a co-one is Dinelson Lamet and Nabil Crismatt, because you remember them as Padres, and then they ended up having. Well, Crismatt had a couple of stints, I think, up and down. I don't remember Lamet, but like it's one of those where down the line, those guys are enough of a name to where you might think about them one day, and then you're like, oh yeah, they were on the Dodgers that 1 year. So.
Hey, Taylor Trammell too, if we want to go position player. Yeah. And actually, Ahmed Rosario was back on the team for a couple days too.
I thought about Ahmed Rosario just because, like, when they traded for him and he was having a good year, and you're like, okay, this guy has a role to fill, and then
turns out he didn't.
Did not have a role to fill. So, all right, but it all worked out for the Dodgers. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Tomorrow's episode we'll be doing the same thing, but talking about the postseason specifically. So make sure to come back and check that out. You can subscribe to the podcast and make sure to get notified when episodes are ready, or when we're going live. Just search Locked On Dodgers wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. If you're on YouTube already, check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles. Those are two 24/7 streaming channels from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can also go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us with any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, text my advice for that podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.